Hello everybody, it's EzraTime again here. Welcome back to another reaction videos, and today we are going to be reacting to another MathPad theory video. This one is called my dumbest theory ever, which is a Fast and Furious theory. Like usually I never really keep up to date with film theory, but this time is different because it's about Fast and Furious, which is like the most ridiculous, I guess one of the most ridiculous franchise ever, that was successful. Like back in there, I used to be a big fan of the Fast and Furious franchise back when Paul Walker are still with us. I still miss him, man, like a lot. But I feel like after Furious 7, that's where the series starts to go downhill for me. And yeah, I did not expect to see MathPad to do a theory for Fast and Furious. And I guess titling the video "My Dumbest Theory Ever," yeah, makes sense. It's the Fast and Furious, theory. So yeah, it's gonna be dumb. But yeah, I cannot wait to see what he's going to discuss in this theory. So without further ado, let's just start the video, shall we?
Did you ever wonder why, across all the fights that happen in the Fast and Furious movies, there's never a clear winner? For all the pipes and wrenches and busted walls.
Let me guess, because there is an ego between Vin Diesel, Jason Statham, and Dwayne Johnson. Right? That's the official answer. They have huge ego. But I'm pretty sure my past is gonna be... Maybe he's gonna present a different theory, who
Some sort of a
knows?
stalemate, or the two get interrupted, or a parking garage collapses on them. Well, there's a very good reason for this, and let me tell you, it ain't the narrative. According to the Wall Street Journal, many of the main characters have it written into their contracts that they cannot lose a fight. Jason Statham negotiated the extent to which he can be beaten up on screen. Vin Diesel polices the number of punches. Statham negotiated the extent to which he can be beaten up on screen. Diesel polices the number of punches he takes, and The Rock works alongside the fight coordinators to make sure that he, quote, gives as good as he gets. Turns out the only thing furious about these movies are the contract negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that was the case, That's why I feel like watching Jason Statham movie, even though he was cool, it's still like, man, come on. God, it's been such a long time since I saw the film theory intro, Oh, okay. Three film theories. Damn,
Welcome to
three
Film
left, huh?
Theory, the show that doesn't have friends, it has family. One of the things that I've really
It's all
appreciated
about family,
hosting
man.
Film Theory specifically is that it's given me the excuse to watch a lot of stuff that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. 50 Shades of Grey, Skinamarink, the KFC telenovela. But of all the things that I've watched for the sake of research, nothing has surprised me half as much as the Fast and Furious franchise. If you were to have made a diagram of things that I'm naturally attracted to in my media diet, these movies would be clear on the other side of the map. But because I actively try to study everything without bias just to understand why so many people enjoy stuff, I finally sat down 2 years ago to binge through these things. And I gotta say, I was blown away. Unironically, I liked them. Sure, there were some that were better than others, but I grew to love the cringe of 3, the spectacle of 5, the emotional send-offs of 7. I couldn't believe it. I became an unabashed fan of the Fast franchise. So much so that I was hyped when promos for Fast 10 came out, and then promptly disappointed when the movie was just kind of meh. But these movies, more than anything else that I've covered on this channel, reminded me to keep an open mind and to constantly be exposing myself to new things that might not initially be to my taste because, hey, who knows, you might just end up liking it. And that's why I'm doing a theory about it today.
Witcher is
Trust
good,
me, it ain't
guys.
for the views,
A lot.
my friends. This one is not gonna perform. This and the Whose Line Is It Anyway episode, they're examples of selfish content at their finest. So, how do you celebrate a dumb action franchise where people Tarzan swing with cars? Well, a dumb franchise deserves itself a dumb theory. And you see, that's the other reason this episode exists. I've been so busy doing such serious stuff in my final days on these channels, exposing AI propaganda, giving up sugar and caffeine, reconnecting with family recipes, and analyzing Hello Neighbor frame by frame, that there hasn't been any room for a dumb episode. Just a dumb, silly willy, stupid episode that no one asked for and that literally no one cares about. I'm talking about something so dumb that it rivals my video essay on Deadpool being Ernest Hemingway. By the way, Lee, with Deadpool and Wolverine coming up later this year, you might want to revisit it.
Yeah, nah, Matt, I'm not doing that.
Sure, you're lost. Anyway, it was while I was watching Vin Diesel racing a bomb through the streets of Rome towards the Vatican that it finally struck me. We see a lot of cars in this franchise, and they are driving literally all the time. So just how much pollution are these guys pumping out into the atmosphere? I mean, these guys are constantly firing off NOS, jumping cars between buildings, drag racing in Japanese parking garages, and globe-trotting to stop the baddies. And how do they do it? Through the love of family and a solid brand deal.
More of a Corona man myself.
But while family may be enough to take down hacker terrorists trying to hijack nuclear submarines, it's not enough to patch the holes in our atmosphere. It's not going to be reducing the smog
You're just
around
gonna talk
LA.
about pollution,
So what exactly is the carbon footprint of the Fast and Furious franchise? Are our heroes actually doing more harm than good by racing through the streets to stop these international super criminals? Fasten your seatbelts and crack open a Corona, my friends. I sat down and ran the numbers, and the answer is gonna shock you. Well, actually, that's probably not true. I don't think you care about this at all. But you know what? It may wind up being mildly interesting. So I figure we should probably be exactly on the same page as to what we're even talking about today, because this is a surprisingly complex topic for such a dumb theory. First and foremost, we need to address what exactly a carbon footprint is. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase tossed around before, but let's actually talk about precisely what it means.
Carbon footprint, not really, not for
tends
me.
to release some sort of greenhouse gas into the air. Every time you ride in a car, a bus, an airplane, it's burning fuel. That combustion reaction releases a bunch of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Using lights and electronics, same thing. More often than not, that energy is coming from the burning of fossil fuels. Even stuff like growing food or making clothing, all of it uses energy. So your carbon footprint then, by its simplest definition, is adding up all the carbon you release into the environment just by living your day-to-day life. This is generally measured in carbon dioxide equivalent. And when you're talking about a 10-plus person crew globe-trotting to stop cyber hackers, those fuel emissions are gonna add up. But why does any of this matter? Well, in 1900, shortly after the Industrial Revolution, almost 2 billion metric tons of CO2 were released due to fossil fuel usage. By 1960, that number had more than quadrupled to 9 billion. More recent data from 2014 places it closer to 35 billion metric tons. In case you were wondering, the average annual carbon footprint for a US citizen, 16 tons. That accounts for everything from commuting to work to heating your house to playing way too much Lethal Company at night. From there, you can actually break it down even further into operational carbon versus embodied carbon. The first is the energy that's used when you're actually doing an activity. The fuel that's burning while you're using a vehicle, for instance. Embodied carbon, meanwhile, includes all the invisible energy that's used to make something. All the emissions related to the vehicle throughout its entire lifespan, from the factory making them to the trucks and ships transporting them. As you might imagine though, trying to hunt down how every single nut and bolt came to be inside of a 2000 Honda just proved to be a bit too time consuming. So we're going to be sticking with the broad operational carbon strokes today. We're theorists. We're not insane. Okay, well, yeah, maybe a little bit of both. So how did we even go about doing this for the Fastiverse? Well, firstly, we split the vehicles in each film into two categories. Motor vehicles like cars, trucks, tanks, etc., and flying vehicles like planes and jets. Then I sat down and watched every movie, identifying every major vehicle used by a main character that I could. Just for an example, Brian drove both a 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse and a 1994 Toyota Supra MK4 in the Fast and the Furious. Then he went on and drove a 2002 Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 7 and a 1999 Nissan Skyline GTR R34
the Nissan Skyline.
Fast 2 Furious. Both a 2002 Nissan Skyline GTR R34 and a 2009 Subaru Impreza WRX in Fast and Furious, that's the fourth one. Both a 2001 Porsche GT3 RS and a 1971 Nissan Skyline GTR in Fast 5, a 1970 Ford Escort RS 1600, a 2010 Nissan GTR R35, and an Alfa Romeo Giulietta in Fast and Furious 6, as well as a 2012 Nissan GTR, Subaru Impreza WRX STI, Toyota Supra MK4, and the coolest one of all, a 2013 Chrysler Town & Country minivan in Furious 7. Obviously, I'm not going to list this out for every single character, but you get the point. We did our research. We did this for every single car that every main character drives. We then pulled the specs on each of them so we could find out their fuel capacity and gas tank size. That way I could calculate roughly how much CO2 they were emitting.
Again, I know this is like ridiculous, but again, you gotta I'm impressed with MathPad and the team effort to making this theory, because it is dumb, but there is a lot of effort being put here. I just want to put it out there. It's amazing.
Scenes that have a ton of cars in them, such as the first race in the Fast and the Furious, as well as the car melee from Too Fast, Too Furious, assigned them either a 13-gallon tank if they were clearly a car, or a 16-gallon tank if they were clearly a truck. The average tank sizes for both those vehicles. Believe me, I would have tracked down the specs for each and every one of those cars if I could, but it's kind of difficult identifying exactly which cars are being used in some of these scenes when there's only like 8 pixels of them in frame, or we only see part of the hood of the car in like the corner of the screen. Then, once we were finished with all of that, we rinsed and repeated the entire process with the jets and the planes. Finally, we used online tools like Google Maps and airline services to figure out the distances driven or flown, as well as the number of hours each vehicle was in operation. So with all of that being said, let's start with the cars, shall we? To calculate how much CO2 our heroes blasted into the atmosphere with their races and heists, I turned to the United States Environmental Protection Agency. According to the EPA, EPA, with every gallon of gasoline you burn to run your car, about 8,000
Imagine if the EPA is
grams of carbon dioxide
becoming
is
the main
created and
enemy
released.
for
So
Dom.
if your gas tank holds 13 gallons of gas, then it generates just over 115 kilograms of CO2, equaling out to roughly 0.115 metric tons of carbon dioxide released out into the atmosphere. Remember, that is for the entire tank gas. It would take you burning through almost 140 full tanks of gas to break into the US average of 16 tons for the entire year. So with all of those numbers in mind, just how big of a footprint did the cars of the Fast and Furious heroes leave in their wake? Well, believe it or not, but the franchise comes out of the gate swinging when it comes to CO2 pollution just from cars. The very first movie basically opens and closes with street races. It features multiple truck robberies, Vin Diesel fleeing the country via car, and a giant racing tournament called Race Wars. Yeah, it was released in 2001, and it certainly shows. In total, by our calculations, 139.65 metric tons of CO2 were released during this film. To make that number a bit more tangible, a typical round-trip flight between New York and London releases 2 metric tons of CO2 per passenger. So you'd be looking at 70 flights worth of CO2 in this one movie alone. That is insane. Or you consider
no kidding.
this, powering a mid-sized house for 3 years, it emits roughly 2 tons of CO2. So again, those cars from the first movie are producing 70 times that amount in just one film. All these numbers, they're kind of ridiculous. And again, we are still just talking about the first movie.
This is the first one.
Too Fast, Too Furious features significantly less carbon pollution, despite Roman and Brian speeding all throughout South Florida trying to stop a drug kingpin. Though it does feature a whopping 61 aggressive gear shifts and pedal stomps, as well as Brian sending a 1969 Yenko Camaro SYC off of a pier and onto a yacht, the total emissions for our heroes' cars is just 21.4 metric tons. See, this one surprised me because the movie actually has a short film prequel on the DVD extras. It shows Brian driving all the way from Los Angeles to Miami. I was kind of expecting that to inflate the total emissions by a good amount, but nope, the overall emissions from a trip didn't make that much of an impact. Speaking of numbers being smaller than you'd expect, despite the third movie, Tokyo Drift, featuring the most time racing, 15 minutes and 10 seconds, the emissions from the heroes are actually the smallest of all the films by far.
I mean, not surprising to me.
3.59 metric tons of CO2 emitted. I credit this to a couple of
things. It's the smallest, Fast and Furious movie. I'm surprised that the first one has a lot more metrics than the other one. I cannot wait to see the number for the future movies,
First,
the Dwayne Johnson one, obviously.
Races, there are only 5 real ones throughout the entire film. The rest of the film is just spent on character drama.
Why don't you nice boys let your cars do the talking?
Only race
true.
How about me? Winner gets me.
Yeah, it released in 2006, and it certainly shows. Also, I recognize that this is now the second time that I've used that excuse in this video, and spoiler alert, it probably won't be the last. Anyway, part 3 of the saga just featured fewer cars in the actual races. Most of them were just one-on-one because of the tighter venues in the streets, parking garages, and mountains of Tokyo. The
it's more
personal.
personal.
This film was all about the drifting, and not
I like
about
it though.
the sheer
I like
volume
Tokyo
of
Drift.
vehicles that were being driven around. But after 2 movies that were light on the carbon emissions, 2009's Fast and Furious seriously made
Here we
up
go.
for some lost time. In the film's cold open heist, literally within the opening seconds of this thing, Dom and his crew steal 2 gas tankers and accidentally blow up a third. Fuel tankers this size typically hold somewhere around 6,000 gallons of gas. This means that Letty and the crew distributed 12,000 gallons of gas to fellow drivers throughout the Dominican Republic, and then an additional 6,000 gallons of gas just burned up right there in the mountains instantaneously. Those 3 tankers alone were responsible for unleashing around 160 metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. 10 times what the average American is going to emit throughout an entire year. Add in an additional 21.4 metric tons from the general racing and driving from the rest of the movie, and part 4 creates a new high for the series at 184.1 metric tons
because of the
CO2,
gas
roughly
tank,
the equivalent
right?
of 90 round trips between New York and London. And then
I was
from
expecting
here,
from the
the
cars.
emissions from the cars in the franchise actually plummet as the Fast franchise shifts more into globe-trotting spy thriller spectacle than its racing roots. That's not to say that there aren't plenty of ridiculous
they
moments
kind of
involving
make sense
cars.
though, yeah,
Fast and
right?
Furious 6's runway chase
They're not
is the
using
scene
more
that has
cars,
the cars
but
going
still.
the fastest for the longest, as Dom and the crew chase an airplane taking off for 13 minutes straight, going roughly 120 miles per hour the entire time. Fun fact about that, that means that this runway would have needed to have been about 26 miles long, 42 kilometers. For comparison, the longest runway in the world is Shigatse Peace Airport in China, coming in at a mere 3 miles, just 5,000 meters. In short, Fast 6's runway here would have had to have been 10 times the length of the longest runway in the world. Like I said
Yeah.
these movies, they're probably dumber than this theory, which, you know, is saying a lot.
Hey, Mia, you better hide your baby or...
You better hide that big ass forehead.
Legit though, that is a great line. The
I mean,
only
yeah,
other way to
true.
liven up that barbecue would have been to use a different
I think it was some
grill.
plan, right?
Seriously,
It was-
Roman, what are you doing, man? Never use a charcoal grill to make hot dogs? Over on Food Theory, I actually talked about all the best and worst ways to
okay.
grill your meat, and the answers
Yeah, that
may
line
surprise
in
you.
when
I know I
The
wasn't
Rock said that
expecting
it
our
wasn't in the
conclusions. You can watch
script,
that
I
video
think.
right now by clicking the
It
link
was
at the top
improvised,
of the description. You're gonna be
which just
so
makes it
prepared
even
for that
better.
next barbecue that your family is gonna be talking about it on road trips and vacations for decades. Speaking of long drives, Fast 5 actually features the single longest driving distance across the entire franchise. Mia and Dom travel from Los Angeles to Rio de Janeiro in a 2003 Acura NSX, and then the 1971 Nissan Skyline GTR. We should also probably mention that they get Dom's Dodge Charger to South America as well. This single 6,000 plus mile trip consumed at least 531 gallons of gas, resulting in the release of 3.6 metric tons of CO2 just from these two characters getting to Rio. That one trip is more than the entirety of what we saw the heroes do in Tokyo Drift. And while Furious 7 certainly featured some memorable car stunts, especially Dom and Brian driving between buildings in Abu Dhabi, as you might imagine, the actual carbon emissions of that stunt were fairly low, since, you know, there's not a whole lot of driving happening there, just a lot of falling. That one stunt actually generated less CO2 than the Paul Walker tribute AMV that appears later in the film. In total,
yeah,
between
makes sense.
Fast 5, Fast
Right.
and Furious 6, Furious 7, The Fate of the Furious, F9, Fast 10, and the spin-off Hobbs and Shaw, we see the heroes generate a measly 41.09 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Just as a reminder, the cold open of the fourth movie alone released 7 times that amount. All in all, when you add up the car emissions from the good guys in these movies, it only comes out to about 388.33 metric tons across the 11 films. It's actually much lower than I expected, to be honest. New York City
Yeah, quite
produces that
surprising,
many metric
to be
tons of
honest.
CO2 in less than 4 minutes. Then again, remember that this is only taking into account the crew's travel via motor vehicles. Maybe things look a bit different when you factor in their airfare. Across the franchise,
okay,
we
here we
counted
go.
about 75 flights taken by the crew across all 11 films, and the distribution of them skews much heavier the later in the series that we get. Our heroes take just 4 flights during the first 4 movies, but after that, the crew really starts to jump all across the world. London, Brazil, Central America to the Caucasus Mountains, Abu Dhabi, New York, Samoa, Russia, Monaco, Berlin, Tokyo, the Caspian Sea. You get the idea. If Taylor Swift is
gonna be
getting
a lot.
canceled for the greenhouse gases emitted by her private jet ride from Japan to the Super Bowl, then the Fast and Furious Familia should probably be getting DQ'd as well. But across all the air travel, one reigns supreme. The single craziest moment from all of these comes in Fast 9, where Roman and Tej fly a car into space to destroy a satellite.
We're in outer space! Man, how much candy did you eat?
Well, I eat candy when I get nervous.
This little jaunt into orbit releases a whopping 269 metric tons of CO2 all on its own. In total, the planes flown by the crew added another 7,185.8 metric tons of CO2 to their footprint, bringing their total carbon footprint to a whopping, drumroll please,
Okay, how many times?
terrible as always. Wouldn't have it any other way, Yossi. 7,573.98 metric tons of CO2. To translate that number into something that actually has meaning, it would take an average American over 473 years to match that amount of CO2 output. But the total did make me wonder, who's the real eco-villain here? The heroes or the bad guys? Well, I ran the numbers for the villains as well. And believe it or not, but the antagonists that they're fighting against in these movies, especially later in the franchise, they release way more carbon than our heroes ever do. For example, in Hobbs and Shaw, the big bad ET
Our hero is safe,
transports
guys, don't
an entire
worry.
army from the UK to Samoa. Dante from Fast X travels the world in his cargo airplanes, while F9 sees its villain sending a satellite into space via a rocket with 2 massive boosters on it. Based on researching SpaceX flights, these 2 boosters here unleashed somewhere around 928 metric tons of CO2, almost 4 times as much as Tej and Roman space flights. And while all of these are certainly significant contributors to the carbon totals, they are nothing compared to the worst carbon offender of the entire series, Charlize Theron's Cypher from The Fate of the Furious. See, Cypher spends all of her time in a mobile workstation, riding a modified Boeing 787,
Her plane never lands.
before immediately taking back off into the sky. There's no way of knowing exactly how much time passes in this film. Trust me, we tried. But considering all the travel and political extradition that our heroes face throughout its runtime, I estimate that it has to be at minimum 10 days. Since a 787 holds about 33.5 1,000 gallons of aviation fuel. That means that Cypher is dumping over 3,200 metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere just in this one movie, and that's just during the time that we see her on screen. This isn't taking into account all of Cypher's travels before the events of Fate of the Furious. In total, the villains spew out 10,213.06 metric tons of CO2. And just to make sure
our
that we're
hero
dotting
is
our
safe,
I's
guys.
across
Don't
our T's
worry.
here, that makes the total carbon footprint for the entire Fast franchise, both its heroes and its villains, to be a whopping 17,787.04 metric tons. And while that might seem like a massive amount, when you put it in perspective, it's really not. After doing all the math, the total carbon footprint of the vehicles across this entire franchise is still less than what New York City generates in 3 hours. That's 17,000 metric tons.
Well, I mean, you're
is
talking about New
slightly
York,
more
right?
than what enters our atmosphere every minute of every day. It would take a single person over 1,000 years to hit that mark. And that, I think, is the true lesson to take away from all this. Just the sheer volume of greenhouse gases produced by our society right now. And the real percentage that you as an individual is actually contributing. Don't get me wrong, whether you're Joe Schmo just going to work or Dominic Toretto trying to stop cyber terrorists from hurting your familia, watching your carbon footprint is a great thing. And collectively, we can make a difference. But it is a small difference when you look at the data. Rewind back to the statistics that I was citing before. Sure, a bunch of muscle cars might be pumping out CO2, but the same as 70 or even 90 round-trip transatlantic flights, that statistic that I kept citing over and over again, that seemed like a weird and vastly overestimated comparison to me. And yet, that was the stat that the websites kept spitting back to me over and over again. But something about those numbers felt off, so I kept digging. And you know what I found? Discussions around carbon footprints are really vague and confusing. Look at the way this website frames it. A round-trip flight from New York to London is 2 metric tons of carbon dioxide per passenger. And this is common. Whenever you look up carbon footprint statistics, it's always targeted specifically at you personally. It's your house, your travel, your problem. But the real problem here is the plane itself. That plane from New York to London, it is dumping 83 metric tons of CO2 out there regardless of whether you're on it or not. On average, there are just under 10,000 planes in the sky at any given time. Your 16 metric tons of CO2 per year, it is a fraction of a drop in that bucket. And yet, the companies out there are constantly passing the blame onto you. Do a search online for top CO2 emitting, and you see the top autocomplete results are for celebrities and countries. You know who you don't see in that autocomplete list? Companies. When they're really the ones with the actual power and responsibility of making impactful.
They're companies, okay. They don't care,
family,
you know.
not just a bunch of
It's about
car thieves
business,
fighting for
right?
justice. Seriously, go back and watch. You'll see that Dom and the gang really just want to live peaceful, non-polluting lives hanging out in their backyard barbecue.
Wow, what a
In
twist.
Fast and Furious 6, the main characters have pretty much settled down on the Canary Islands, living low-key lives that don't involve spewing
They're the
tons of
hero all
carbon
the
into
time.
atmosphere. In Furious 7, they're back in Los Angeles again trying to live normal lives. Brian even got himself a responsible minivan. What's that tell ya? In F8, Dom and Letty are relaxing in Cuba. Furious 9, they've settled down on a ranch. And in Fast X, they've rebuilt their LA house and are just trying to be parents. Uncle John Cena even does his best to be environmentally friendly by busting out a personal aircraft that could be powered by just 3 shooters of vodka that had got on a plane.
Oh, yeah.
These guys are not just
that.
warriors, they are eco-warriors. Taking down bad guys, polluting our oceans, our skies, and our roads. Kind of like a modern-day, very mumbly voiced Captain Planet. I bet they even responsibly recycle their Corona bottles. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. If you want another Fast and Furious theory right now, we actually did one a couple years ago dissecting the franchise.
No, I missed this. I didn't know that this was exist.
Figure out exactly
Maybe
which
this one
movie
next, who
is
knows?
the fastest and which one is the most furious. Or if you need some help
But,
translating Vin Diesel, go check out our theory on how to speak Groot, probably the single best role he's ever played. Regardless, I'll see you all next
Oh man. Okay. This seems also quite fun. But yeah, I think this whole video is quite fun, and I guess learning a bit more about carbon you know, in the air obviously. But I feel like it's quite fun because how MatPat is like presenting the theory. I think this all came down to how entertaining the editing and the presentation done by MatPat, you know, because but yeah, I was engaged, you know, even though like it's indeed a dumb theory, but that's the whole point of the video. It's a dumb theory, right? Yeah, I did not expect this to came to the conclusion that in the end where the family was like, oh yeah, they're also eco-friendly compared to us, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's quite surprising. I guess in terms of the cars, this is quite surprising for me because I thought that at first I thought this is gonna be like the lowest one, like the earliest one, because I think this is like the lowest one for like the third one is like the lowest one until this one. The sixth one is the lowest one, which is like, that's quite insane to me, man. Because I feel like this one should be the lowest one, but it seems like, oh, never mind, Hobbs and Shaw is the lowest one. Okay, sure, man. I mean, it's a rough data, right? It's a theory, but yeah, it came as a surprise for me because I thought that the car, carbon is gonna be much more higher as we go on. But I guess now that I think about it, now that I see the data by MatPat, it kind of makes sense, Like in the first one, they drive cars a lot. They don't fly a plane, never. And also in 4 1, they never fly a plane before. Like Fast 5, moving forward, they flew a lot of plane, and I feel like, yeah, it's. That makes sense. That makes sense, honestly. The more I think about it, and it's like, yeah, even though it first come as a surprise, but yeah, I guess that's my reaction, and for this dumbest theory ever. I mean, yeah, it is dumb, but you know what? It's quite fun. I'm gonna miss MatPat when he's no longer hosting the film theory and the game theory. So I might as well enjoy while he's still here. And it's about Fast and Furious. I love the franchise. Used to love the franchise. Now not so much, because they're kind of dumb. It wasn't kind of dumb, but like they're just super dumb at this point, and it's like super bloated to the point that I don't really enjoy them that much anymore. I know that Fast X was better than F9, but at the same time, it's not like super better than F9. It's just a tiny bit better than F9. So it was like quite disappointing. And I think Fast and Furious 11 is gonna be the final one. So that's gonna be exciting, and we also get to see Hobbs and Dante. I think that's gonna be the next, Dwayne Johnson movie in the future. So, okay, either way, guys, that's my reaction for the Fast and Furious dumbest theory ever. Let me know in the comment section below, guys. What do you guys think about this video right here? Do you guys enjoy it? Like, do you guys think this is like super dumb? Let me know all that in the comment section below, guys. And did the result kind of surprise you, like I did for the car, especially? Like, did that surprise you, or do you guys didn't really care? But yeah, let me know all of that in the comment section below, guys. And if you guys want to watch the original video, then again, the link will be in the description below. And make sure you guys check the Film Theory channel. The link will also be in the description below. And subscribe to MatPat, show some support, and yeah, if you guys enjoyed this reaction video, then leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the videos, usual stuff, guys, and stay tuned for more videos in the future. And again, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye.